First, to the high cost of housing in Boston. For many, it's close to impossible to afford to live in or around the city. Rents are skyrocketing, now around $2,200 a month, median, according to Boston City data. And a recent Globe story featured a couple making more than $90,000 a year, couldn't afford to rent anything big enough for them or their 2 kids in Boston. As for ownership, a recent city report finds a household earning $80,000 a year can't afford to own even the least expensive property in the city. So, is there a fix? Joining me now to talk about that are Sheila Dillon. Sheila's Boston's housing chief, director of Boston's Department of Neighborhood Development. Sheila, it's great to see you.
Thank you.
Mark Drayson, whose work as executive director of the Metropolitan Area Planning Council, focuses on economic growth and housing challenges. Good to see you too, Mark.
Thank you, Jim.
I can't say I was surprised by the Globe story the other day, but how unaffordable is Boston in tangible ways for, let's say, moderate income families?
Well, people are spending a lot more money on housing throughout the greater Boston region. Boston's not the only place where this is occurring. We have constricted the supply of affordable housing over the past 10, 20, 30 years, especially in some of the communities outside of Boston. And that lack of supply is going to have an impact over time, and it's causing prices to go up.
But even though it's not going to make anybody watching this feel any better, is this atypical or other major desirable American cities not suffering the exact same problem?
It's typical of cities that are desirable, and one of the great things that we're seeing right now is that people want to move back to the cities. People want to live an urban lifestyle, and that's great, but it bids up the price of housing, and it means that we have to find a way to do 2 things. First, we have to build more housing to meet that demand, and secondly, we have to deal with the price impacts for lower income families who really can't afford it.
You know, Sheila, the headline still emblazoned in my head from like a year ago in the Globe is that Millennium Towers condo for $37.5 million. I know that's not typical, but people see that is the trend. Are things a lot worse than they were in terms of affordability 5, 10 years ago in Boston?
I mean, certainly, you know, you've mentioned rents and sales prices are going up. It is a supply problem. So we're really committed, the Walsh administration is really committed to increasing the supply of housing. We think we need 53,000 units of housing to just meet the demand of an increased population.
You're nodding your head up and down. That number sounds reasonable.
You know, the mayor's housing plan is a good one. 53,000 is a big number, and that's what we're going to need.
And how real is it?
Oh, it's very real. It's well.
I mean in terms of being achieved. I don't mean in terms of the intent.
Absolutely. So to date, we've got about 14,000 permits pulled. We've got about another 9,000 units sort of under review, and they're looking good. But the key is not just to build the Millennium Towers. The key is to build housing for the middle income and a lot more affordable housing, which is also in the report.
When you say affordable housing, for whom?
Right. So we're defining affordable housing for households making less than $50,000 a year. And it goes down from there. Some Section 8, the average, income's $14,000, $15,000, $16,000.
But the middle-class family watching here says, that's great, and I wish them luck. That's not me.
That's not me.
I make too much, but not enough.
That's right. So the mayor's been very fixated on this. We need to build housing that really serves households that are making between 125, and we're employing a lot of strategies to do that. We're putting out city-owned land. We're filing for tax relief for developers who want to develop this kind of housing.
As the carrot for them to do this, yeah.
Because we've got to incentivize the market.
Mark Drayson, what are they missing? What should be added to their agenda?
Well, I don't really think they're missing things. I think it's just a question that we all need to generate more resources for housing production. We need to be able to not only subsidize lower income housing production, but also to be able to really encourage the development of middle income housing as well. I think one of the biggest discussions we're going to have in the city over the course of the next several years is whether we adopt the Community Preservation Act, which is a state law that allows individual cities to put a tiny increase on their property tax, and then the state matches that money.
Do you sponsor that act in Cambridge, by the way? Oh, that might have been me, Mark Drayson.
Yes, I did that with you. But that's a good
council.
point. It's been adopted in Cambridge, in Newton, in Fall River, in Somerville, in 140 cities and towns throughout the state, but not yet Boston. Boston rejected it in 2001. Since that time, we have lost, the city of Boston has lost close to $500 million that could have gone to this work, including money from state match. So it's going to be up again.
Is that something could be on Walsh's agenda or no?
We're absolutely looking at it. Mark's right, we need to generate more money. We right now are generating 70% of the money that we need to use to build affordable housing. It's city generated. It's coming from linkage, it's coming from inclusionary development, it's coming from our own operating budget. all of those policies we're looking at to increase.
You know, the conventional wisdom is, the concern is to keep businesses here and for businesses to allow their millennial workers to be able to afford here. But isn't the senior population growing at a pretty high rate? How do we deal with those two sort of ends of the spectrum?
Right. So we have the perfect storm. We have seniors that are aging in place. We have the boomers that are here and they're aging in place, and many of them are in large single-family, two-family homes, and many of them want to stay. And then we have an increase in the workforce, people moving into Boston. So we have sort of this logjam of housing. So you're absolutely right. We also need to build more senior housing, so we will empty up or make available some of those starter homes.
We only have a minute left. Two things that have been left out of this discussion, which sort of surprised me. Very quickly, want to get your reaction. Universities, more kids and more kids and more kids, and we read in the Globe that these payments in lieu of taxation are pathetic, if I may say. One, isn't that part of the solution? And number two, why aren't either of you talking about rent control? Disappeared 20 years ago. Clearly, in places like Boston, while it was repealed statewide, the places that had it voted overwhelmingly to keep it. Why is that not on
the Walsh
anybody's
administration
agenda?
has really been encouraging universities to build more dorms, and some of them are. And I think that's a
So
good
they're not
move,
taking away
that's a
private
good move in the
housing.
right direction, so that over time they will take away less private housing. On the rent control situation, you know, I wish we could solve this problem entirely through an increase in supply, but we may not be able to. It may be necessary to try and consider regulatory tactics again.
Sheila Dillon, why not a non-extreme version of rent control as a home rule petition? Send it to the legislature. Marty Walsh calls his good friend Charlie Baker and says we need this in the
Once
hub
again,
of
we would
Boston.
need state approval for
Correct.
rent control, which I think would be very difficult. So I think what we want to do is focus on solutions we think we have a chance of winning. The students were right. We have 36,000 undergraduate students right now living in Boston, and they're living in housing that was traditionally available for working families. So we do need to get that stock back.
May you succeed, Sheila
Thank
Dillon.
you.
Thanks to
Thanks.
see you. Mark Drayson, you as well.
Thank you, Jim.
Good to see you both.